They called him Terrible Terry Allen because he fought from the front and made headquarters nervous. In the summer of 1943, fresh off victories in Sicily, he was told to hand over the storied 1st Infantry Division and go home. Months later, he reappeared in Oregon, shaping a new division to fight in the dark. The same general who was relieved in daylight would come back to lead soldiers who preferred night. Allen came out of the First World War with scars and a creed. The field came first. He had seen staffs plan beautifully and soldiers bleed for gaps those plans never noticed. He learned to read ground, to prize initiative, and to talk to men in a language they trusted. That voice, direct, salty, impatient with polish, would make him beloved in foxholes and suspect among superiors who wanted spit and polish order. When the United States prepared to land in North Africa, Allen took charge of the 1st Infantry Division. He pressed training hard in the United Kingdom and stateside posts, pairing seasoned hands with fresh recruits and pushing young officers to improvise under pressure. He kept his circle close. Theodore Roosevelt Jr. brought energy and rapport. Norman Cotter hammered practical solutions. The message repeated by Allen was simple: move, close, and finish. If a plan breaks, break the enemy faster. Algeria and Tunisia were a shock. American formations met an opponent who knew the desert and struck first. After early confusion and hard knocks, Allen's division found its stride. The crisis that burned into memory was Kasserine Pass, where American units were driven back by an experienced German attack. In that chaos, Allen's infantry steadied alongside armour, buying time, plugging gaps, and restoring confidence that had wavered in the sandstorm of defeat. He was not the only author of the recovery, but his insistence on simple orders and visible leadership helped reknit a shaken force. El Guettar became the proof. Allen's soldiers fought with stubborn method, integrating anti-tank guns, scouts and artillery in a layered defence followed by hard counter-punches across stony ridges. He captured lessons the plain way: dig deep, see farther, keep your guns talking, and push the fight back onto the enemy when he pauses. The division advanced, and with each step the case for Allen's battlefield style seemed stronger. Sicily revealed the tension inside that success. At Gela and beyond, the 1st Division landed, held and pushed inland against tough ground and a determined foe. Allen kept pressure high and accepted losses to keep momentum. Records and recollections agree on a friction that grew with higher command. Senior leaders wanted stricter discipline and tighter control after action. Allen believed results spoke loudest. The campaign culminated in the bitter hills near Troina, where the division broke through after battered days. Then came the order. Allen would be relieved and replaced by Clarence Hubner. He did not vanish in scandal. He departed amid praise in public and blunt critiques in private, a paradox printed on the cover of a national magazine that made him famous even as he lost his post. Back in the United States, Allen's career resumed with a new command, the 104th Infantry Division. He took the sting of Sicily and turned it into method. If daylight exposed raw infantry to every German eye and machine gun, darkness might even the odds. He drilled the division for night work: quiet movement, disciplined intervals, rehearsed hand signals, measured bursts instead of blazing noise. The aim was not romance but survival. Darkness would be a tool, not a talisman. By the time the division sailed for Europe in 1944, the Timberwolves, as they were known, had a clear identity. They would move when others slept, cross rivers and streets in silence, and win ground before the enemy could mass fire. Their motto captured the spirit that Allen stoked. Nothing in hell must stop us. He said it without poetry, asking men to believe that planning and grit, not swagger, would carry them through towns whose names they would learn in the rain. In Belgium and Germany, the approach met reality. Night attacks demanded discipline more than fury. Scouts to feel the edge of a village, engineers to mark lanes, platoons to slide past houses, and hit strong points from angles daylight never offered. Allen prized grenades, bayonets, and short, sudden volleys. Darkness became a shield for careful violence that saved lives by breaking defences before they fully woke. Correspondents and after-action reports alike noticed the puzzle the Timberwolves set for their opponent. Positions that stood all day would collapse before dawn, not to overwhelming firepower but to stealthy pressure applied at the seam. A myth grew at the edges, as myths do. Some stories claimed the Americans carried empty rifles to force silence, others that the enemy feared Allen personally. The record is straighter and still impressive. Rifles were loaded. Safety and discipline, not emptiness, kept muzzles cold until the moment. As for fear, German units respected divisions and methods that produced momentum with few signals to read. Newsmen loved great man frames, but the battlefield answered to patterns more than personalities. Allen knew this, and the men under him felt the difference between flattery and the nightly grind. Morale mattered as much as maps. Allen wrote to units and praised leaders by name, not for pageantry but to show that effort was seen. Short phrases hammered home identity in a world that could unmake it in minutes. When winter pressed and towns turned to rubble, those words and the rhythms of night movement gave soldiers a sense that their risk had shape and purpose. The Timberwolf patch stitched onto sleeves meant a way of fighting, not just a place on a roster. Allen's second act did not erase the first. Sicily remained a contested verdict, a division that delivered results under a commander, whose style strained the chain of command. In Europe, the 104th compiled a record that aligned with Allen's argument. Trained initiative and practical doctrine could lower cost while holding pressure on the enemy. The same traits that once sparked censure, focusing on performance over parade polish, leaning on trusted subordinates, shaping tactics to the ground, now looked like the army learning from its own friction. When the war edged to its close, Allen's reputation settled into something denser than a legend. He was the soldier's general who got knocked down and came back with a better answer, not by changing who he was, but by giving his instincts a system. He never pretended that nights were easy, or that slogans won fights. He believed that preparation and restraint could make courage count. He learned in the desert how swiftly confusion kills, and in northern towns how quietly resolve can break a line. If a single arc ties his career, it is the paradox of a man who resisted rigid order, yet left behind a disciplined way to fight. He had clashed with superiors over appearance and protocol. He proved, with a division of night-trained infantry, that rigor can be built without parade ground shine. Veterans carried that lesson home in habits and in stories, told with fewer exclamation points than headlines. Commanders who studied the campaign reports saw in the Timberwolves a template. Find the tool that fits the ground, teach it until it becomes reflex, and trust leaders close to the mud. The general who broke rules did not defeat the Axis alone, and he did not travel without mistakes. He did, however, show how an army learns in war. Relief became not an end, but a hinge. On one side stood a fighter whose results stood in tension with discipline. On the other side marched a formation that used the dark to punch cleanly through stubborn ground. If fear ever touched the enemy at his name, it came not from personality, but from a method that arrived like a whisper and left like a signature. That is how Terry Allen, once sidelined, returned to write his answer in the Knights of Europe.